Hello, and welcome to Right in Front of My Face, the podcast talking about big things happening right in front of us. I'm your host, Shannon Hull, and today we are talking about a COVID pivot that I've seen a bit lately, can be a bit uncomfortable and yet highly relatable: divorce. Strange that being locked in a house with your partner would make you question your life's choices. Because I'm hearing anecdotal evidence about more people splitting this year than I've heard in the past, I decided to do some research into whether or not what I was hearing on the street was actually true. I'm no marriage professor, but I thought I'd look into it. Turns out it just might be. Here are some statistics I found that I thought you all might enjoy. Caveat, these are taken from a divorce attorney's compilation of divorce studies, so take them with a grain of salt. There are nearly 3 divorces in the time that it usually takes for a couple to recite their wedding vows, which is around 2 minutes. The risk of divorce was said to be almost doubled, 90% higher, when the mother went out to work, but her husband made a quote unquote minimal contribution to housework and childcare. In 2022, expect the divorce rate to be at least 44.2%. Rather than turning to a divorce attorney for an interview, I thought it might be more illuminating to hear from a marriage counselor. Maybe we can come through this next 50 minutes with some advice and hope rather than a sense of doom for our relationships. So enter in Zach Brittle. Zach is a Gottman certified marriage therapist. You'll learn what that means in the episode. He's also a best-selling author and also a podcaster. His show, Marriage Therapy Radio, provides weekly insights into the daily struggles of marriage and offers a look into the science behind great relationships. Zach agreed to lend his expertise on why couples might have had more conflict over the last 2 years, and then identifies ways we might reevaluate our current relationships and set a new course for the future. For anyone in a partnership, this episode isn't a downer. It's meant to give us all some new tools and perspective as we all reset post-COVID. Let's face it, most relationships could benefit from some new tools in the toolbox. Enjoy. We have another professional podcaster on the show today, therapist, writer, teacher, Zach Brittle. You are the best-selling author of The Marriage Alphabet and the Marriage Therapy Journal. You are a Gottman certified marriage counselor, and you have your own podcast called Marriage Therapy Radio.
All of that is true.
Which just joined the iHeartRadio family, which is very exciting.
Yeah, we're excited.
So thank you for carving an hour out of your busy therapy and celebrity schedule to come into my basement and talk to me about what I have seen to be a COVID pivot, because that's what my season is all about. And that pivot seems to be divorce.
Okay.
And so I have questions, Zach, a lot of them. Have you found there to be an uptick in people coming to you in 21 and 22 saying, I'm done?
No, I haven't. I've been very busy in the last 2 years. I slowed down the month that COVID happened, like in April and May of that year. And then after that, particularly when we went to being able to meet online, I was crazy busy. And yeah, there's been some changes. I wouldn't say it's been people saying, I'm done, but I think particularly as we come out of this thing, or we head out of this thing, there's definitely been a shift in the kind of the way people are leveraging therapy, right? It's just a different beast, actually. So
just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think there was a thing that we all had before COVID, those of us who were sort of in the typical work life, which is we had comings and goings that we could sort of say, bye, see you later. And then I'll miss you. And then, oh, good to see you at the end of the day. And then that went away because we were all just inside the house together. And so that changed the way that people were in relationship, and they didn't quite know it until they, because at first when COVID came in, it was like, oh, this is going to be 2 weeks.
No big deal.
No, but 2 more weeks.
Family time.
Yeah. And okay, we'll take the summer off and then we'll get back to school in the fall, and then maybe Thanksgiving. And then wait, this is the new reality. I think once that started to happen, people kind of started to go, I don't know how to do this. And that has definitely been a pivot for at least the couples in my practice. I don't know how people doing it outside of therapy. Let's just, the people that are coming into me are like, we have no idea. I'm tired of this person. I don't want to be around them anymore. Yeah. All of the things that used to be charming now are annoying. And then what I was going to say a little bit earlier is there's this other piece, which is people coming into my practice now. There's a lot of people coming back into my practice. So I saw them before COVID, and now that things are loosening up, they're coming back. And so there's a big part of John Gottman's research, which is about how 2/3 of the issues in any relationship are perpetual. They're never going away. They're like always going to be there.
So wait, put a pin in that for a second, because I think it's really important to talk about the Gottman method for just a second before you kind of get into it, because it is, I don't know, it really makes a lot of sense because it takes relationships down and breaks it into science a little bit.
Yeah, I can give you the cliff notes. So John is Dr. John Gottman. He's 80 years old. He lives on Orcas Island, which is right near here. He spent most of his career at the University of Washington, where he was researching couples. John met and married his wife, Julie. John will say that he is a mathematician, scientist, researcher first. He added therapist later. Julie is definitely a therapist who added researcher. The two of them created the Gottman method to take the 40 years of research that he had done and turn it into a methodology for training couples about how to kind of make their marriage work. He got famous for being able to predict divorce, which I put in air quotes because I think it's really more like clickbait. It's not exactly what he can do, but what he does do is sort of positively correlate behaviors that are consistent among couples that are divorcing and who are miserable, and then also positively correlate behaviors that are consistent among couples that are doing okay, that are staying together. And so the methodology was designed to help people avoid the things that are divorce predictors and help lean into the things that are principles. There are 7 principles for making marriage work. So that's his like kind of the overall thing. And then so we can go real deep into like, okay, what predicts divorce? We can go real deep into, what are the principles that makes marriage work? The thing that I was referencing is there's this piece of research that he did where he was watching couples in a longitudinal study. So he would see them year 2, 5, 7, 10, whatever. And he noted that he was able to observe that, wait, way does he put it? He says the hairstyles and the outfits changed, but the arguments were the same. So about 2/3 of what, in about 2/3 of the cases, about 2/3 of the issues that are present in a relationship are always going to be present, always. And then there's another third that are solvable. So the prescription is solve your solvable problems. And then you create dialogue and empathy and compassion and compromise around the perpetual problems. I'm having the experience of watching couples come in 3 years later and they're talking to me and I'm like, oh, I remember this exact same conversation. It just was in a totally different context, right? Their kids were younger, or they used to drink and now they don't, or there's COVID and now there's, whatever, there's been a job change or job loss or whatever, but the details are different, but the DNA of the conflict is the same.
Interesting.
And so that has been a real challenge for people to kind of adapt to, because what they have that they didn't have before was this kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. Right? When you're in the flow of kind of your normal every day is the same flow of life, which was before, say, 2020. And then you have this massive disruption that kind of changes everybody's perception of what before and after is, right? There's before COVID, and then there's after COVID, or there's used to be normal and now there's new normal. I don't know what it is, but people, I think, are, to your question about divorce, evaluating whether or not they want to keep doing this in the kind of post-COVID existence.
It's super interesting because I'm just sitting here kind of reflecting as you've been talking, and you said something in the very beginning where it's like that rhythm of daily life is gone. And for me, like I realized not only, I had 2 little kids at home,
mm-hmm.
but also I'm a complete extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I'm married to one of those.
Need other people.
Yeah.
Like a flower needs water.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing okay. And then finally, when the gym opened up kind of in like November, December, and I'm also like a total exercise
mm-hmm.
person. Exercise is my channel for anxiety, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I went to the gym and was like talking to the front desk person and chatting with the people around the weights with our masks on, I left the gym and I was like, oh my gosh.
This is what I'm made for.
I had no idea that I was missing that fuel.
Well, my wife is like, I'm going to go to Costco. Does anybody need anything from Costco? Because I'm just going to be at Costco. And she would spend like 3 hours at Costco because she would be like, hey, what are you shopping for? And hey, oh no, hey, how's your job? What are you? And how do you like your job? And maybe you want to have lunch over here?
Oh my God,
strangers, you know, like,
that resonates.
But yeah, I mean, I'm an introvert, so I was loving it. I was doing great. Like if I could just stay in my house with my TV show and my, you know, crossword puzzle, I was doing just fine.
Yeah.
But no, that's not the case for everybody. And introverts, extroverts had of course they had a really hard time. Everybody had a hard time, but people with toddlers, people with teenagers, and extroverts. And so we hit 2 of those buttons for sure.
Yeah, but then you kind of, it does put a lot of pressure on the person that you're living with to provide that fuel, where a lot of people I feel like are that yin and yang. Like there's always one that wants to go to the party and the other one wants to leave early, right? That's just like the dynamic of a lot of marriages, it seems like.
Yeah.
So is that something that you're seeing? Are couples coming saying, I can't, like, there's no lever to take the pressure off? A
little bit. I think, you know, again, I'm sort of in this like kind of post-COVID mindset. I mean, everything I did for a while was online, and now I would say about 60% of my practice is in person now. And those people that are coming back in, I think they're honestly looking for a way to release the pressure. I wouldn't say it's strictly introvert, extrovert, but it is some kind of like, hey, if we're going to make another run at this, and I have a new theory about the run, I think it should be about 3 years at a time, then we need to establish the playing field again. We need to try and reestablish what the boundaries are going to be, or what the rules are going to be in this relationship, because it can't be the way it was.
That's super interesting to kind of look at it as a new beginning, sort of.
Yeah. I mean, I think people have them no matter what. I mean, I think we have them, period, because of course the new beginning is when you first meet, your relationship was non-existent and then it existed. That's one. But then we have them throughout our whole life. Like your relationship was like X before you had a baby, and then it was like X times 2 after you had a baby, or it was like Z after you had a baby. You know, sometimes there's the affair, sometimes there's the COVID, sometimes there's the bankruptcy, whatever. But there are befores and afters that are built into every relationship all the time. And we talk about them. We do it unconsciously, almost go, oh yeah, before we had kids, we used to go to movies all the time. That's just a thing that we say. And now we're starting to say, oh, before COVID, before the lockdown, we did this. And now this isn't a thing that we do all the time anymore. And in fact, we've learned so much more about each other. We have to kind of have this sort of re-upping in terms of what we're going to do, you know?
Yeah. Talk about your every 3 years idea a little bit, because I'm interested.
That's new to me in terms of just kind of way I think about my own relationship and the way I think about therapy, the way I think about a lot of things. But it came because I was in a conversation with an anthropologist who was talking about when relationships were first, when families were first happening, like in pre-civilization times, they were mostly migratory. And so what would happen is she would ovulate and she'd have sex with 5 or 6 guys, and the baby would come out and it would look like that guy. And then he would go, okay, I guess I'm with you until we raise this thing that's now 3 years old and able to kind of function basically as a member of the society. And then she would ovulate again and she'd have sex with 5 or 6 guys, and the strongest sperm would win. And it might look like the first guy, but it might look like the other guy. And if it was the other guy, then the other guy would say, okay, I guess I'm with you now. And it was just sort of this hodgepodge of creating the cycle of a bond that was about 3 years long. So kind of depends on how you feel about anthropology and evolution, but, or anthropological evolution. But basically it wasn't until people stopped moving, they sat down and they said, hey, here's my land. He said, this is my land. So I'm going to need you'll be my woman. And then we'll make some people and they can help me do my land. And that was when families started happening. And so the idea even of a modern marriage is pretty new. But a lot of people hold to this theory that this life cycle of a romantic relationship is about 3 years long. So I've been married 25 years. That's 8 and a half cycles. And when I've done those on purpose, they've worked out pretty good. When I've not done them on purpose, like COVID, we were like, whoa, hold on. So here we are, we're kind of in the middle of some sort of 3-year thing maybe. And it took us all off guard. And so we were like, wow, we were all making up. Everybody literally was making it up as we went along.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how for us in sort of North America, COVID is the first time we've ever had a thing that was traumatic and we didn't know when it was going to be over. So you think about like war or drought. We've never done war or drought. And now we've done this thing that is like, oh, what's the end? And what now is the end?
Ending? Are we fine with it now?
What is the thing? Is it going to rain? Maybe there's clouds, but maybe not. Maybe we should keep doing the thing whatever. So disorientation is really hard for people. And that's where you have to bring some kind of orientation back. And that's where I've been kind of thinking a lot about this sort of 3-year cycle. So particularly for couples who are in distress, I'm sort of proposing, well, okay, let's say that we're going to do this, but we're going to do it for 3 years. We're going to sort of reestablish the next 3-year thing and kind of look at like, not that we're going to get divorced in 3 years, but sort of go, okay, our kids are going to move from elementary to middle school by 3 years. That's going to require a different style of parenting anyway. Or our kids are going to leave the house in 3 years.
Well, I think that is such an important point, because where we started off, just and using our family purely as context here, but we started off with a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we now have a 7-year-old and an almost 11-year-old. Those are very different children.
Yeah.
And they need different things. And I am, as the primary parent and caregiver, having to really like evolve in my own way of thinking without kind of the, I don't know, I kind of call it the pick up and drop off education.
Yeah. Well, parenting is not a thing, right? Parenting is this, when you first become a parent, you have one job, and that's to keep the baby alive.
Right.
You're not talking about keeping your babies alive anymore.
No. And it's an evolution that happens really fast.
Yeah.
And everybody with an older child that I know has said, like, brace yourself, because this like 4th to 5th transition is big.
Yeah.
And now that I'm here, I'm like, oh boy, yep, that's true. And so you need, a whole new set of tools.
Well, listen, mine are 19 and 15, and it's never been harder.
Oh, really?
Never.
Zach, those are not the hopeful words.
Sorry about that. It might be my kids, but that is the reality of the situation. Is it never gets easier. It's always challenging, and it's always pushing your buttons. It's always making you think that there is, somehow you're going to master it. But the second you master it, the rules change. Well, and I think a marriage is the same. Like a marriage is kind of the same.
1,000%. And so one thing, we have in our house several things working for us, because we are like pretty privileged. We have space in our house. We have desks. We were able to kind of manage it. But the biggest factor for us is that my husband is a pediatric dentist, and he had an office to go to, and it was empty, but he had a place to go, to be an introvert and to kind of like gather himself and figure out how he was going to weather his business. But we were not stuck together.
I tried for a minute to see clients at my house, and I couldn't do it. I like through Zoom. I just didn't, I realized I needed to go somewhere else, and because two things. One is it helped me change up my scenery a little bit. It made my house bigger for my family. But then also I didn't want my clients in my house. I didn't want people like, oh, that's a nice kitchen, or what room are you in today? Or I didn't like that at all. So I pretty quickly transitioned from my makeshift home office back into my regular space. And I love it.
I feel like a lot of mental health professionals work great with Zoom.
Yeah. I mean, I have two experiences. I have the experience of a therapist, and couples therapy is especially hard because you rely so much on body language and nuance and kind of how you are changing, like how you're paying attention to the energy in the room. That's really hard to do over Zoom, more so I think than individual therapy. So I didn't love it. And of course it's especially hard when they're on two different screens and you're sort of doing this thing. But as a client, I have my own therapist. I found that I actually preferred being on the phone. I didn't like Zoom at all. Well, so it's interesting with podcasting too, because I feel like when you're on a screen, it adds, for me personally, this element of inhibition and still like that voice in my head critiquing how I look on screen. And it's not great. Yeah. For me personally, I don't know if everybody, but there's a certain intimacy I agree better handsome, over the phone. I don't mind looking at myself on this phone. Just kidding.
I pick everything. My husband started making fun of me because every time I would pop on a Zoom, be like, "Oh my God, my hair!" Like,
yeah.
It's like lay off.
That's why I just shave my head. I'm just like, I've never had a bad hair day.
I'm not quite to that point yet. We are here with Cassie Walker Johnson with Johnson & Walker with Windermere. First question I have for you, Cassie. If a seller wants to maximize their return on investment, what should they be focused on?
The most important thing that you can focus on is flooring, lighting, painting, and yard cleanup. Those are the first 4 items that we always go to really help a client update with a way that gives the house a real sparkle. And then from there, if they want to do further investment, we always recommend focusing on kitchens and bathrooms. Those are the first 2 things that make the biggest impression when somebody's coming to look at their home, and therefore you'll get a higher return on investment.
Cassie, do you give people advice on these 4 ways to make their home sparkle?
Not only do we give advice, but we help manage it. We bring the vendors. We offer full concierge service so that we can help you get the best bang for your buck.
You all can find Cassie at johnsonandwalker.com.
See you there.
What are like the top 3 things that you're seeing post-pandemic relative to couples wanting in or out of their marriage? Because I'm surprised, based on just purely anecdotally what I'm hearing and reading, that your experience hasn't been couples saying we're done. But I suppose maybe if they're coming to therapy, the immediate is like, we're going to save this.
Yeah, they don't call me, they call their lawyer.
Yeah.
If they're trying to get out. But if they're trying to stay in, I think again, part of what COVID did was it reset the playing field for everybody. And so you had this, I think what you have now is everybody going, okay, what is going to be the new way that we play this game? And everybody's kids are older. And, a big thing that comes into my office is how people have dealt with the threat of the virus.
That's what I was going to ask.
Like, you might have somebody who's way more conservative in their, not even just their political beliefs, but just in their health and safety protocol posture. And then somebody else who's more like, whatever. I mean, and the truth is with this thing, you can be double vaccinated and triple masked and never go to the store and you get it. And you can also be homeless and licking doorknobs and making out with,
a number of things
and not get it. There are of course ways that you can be cautious and you can protect yourself, but you're still at the mercy of a thing that you can't see, that doesn't obey your rules. And so you have to control what you can control. And a lot of people are having a hard time doing that because she really wants to go take advantage of the fact that she doesn't have to wear a mask at the happy hour with her girlfriends. And he's like, hold on, who's going to be there? And are they vaccinated? And what time, and what is the deal? And, the waiters, are they wearing masks? And it's just so that's a one that I see more often than I thought, because you just sort of think people are going to be aligned in that way, but they're not always.
No. And I think I've seen it in families too, where, the grandparents don't care.
Totally.
And we had that in our house too, where, my mom was out and about and our main goal was to kind of keep my husband at work. Mm-hmm. And so we did a pod, we did this, we were super careful because that was kind of the goal, is like keep our kids in school and keep my husband at work. Mm-hmm. And so we were, I think some of my extended family looked at that and was like, you guys are nuts. Mm-hmm. And now looking back on it, it feels nuts, but it worked.
Yeah,
but it was what it was.
It was what it was.
But my husband and I were on the same page with that also. So it wasn't like we were infighting. But I think another thing that I noticed was, or wondered about, maybe not noticed, was how differences between like vaccine beliefs were in families.
Yeah, I don't see that a lot inside the couple. I definitely see that inside the generations that include the in-laws or whatever. But it's pretty rare in my practice anyway, that in the Pacific Northwest that people are sort of going to be split about whether or not to make this one health choice that was, at least around here, pretty well accepted as the norm. I just didn't see a lot of it, but certainly people worried about their parents and their grandparents, whether it was trying to keep them safe or whether trying to deal with kind of their own sort of messaging around it. People's parents are generally older, and so maybe a little bit more cautious or conservative. And a lot of them would live in other places. And so there's these questions of who can visit and when and how and why, and all of that came up. But that was less traumatic for people, I think, than the fact that they're just bored. They're just bored of each other. I mean, they wake up and every day was the same and you're still here and I don't know what to do with you. And so there's a lot of just sort of atrophy, I think, that happened for people in the relationship that they weren't prepared for.
How did you find it to be with loads of sort of household stuff breaking down as two people were at home? Like, I definitely felt like my load kind of stayed the same despite having another person whose, professional life had been put on hold a little bit. Has that been a variable for people?
I don't think I heard about it a lot. I mean, I think everybody, again, what people were doing was having to rearrange their floor plans to include schoolrooms and kind of rearrange their dinner plans to include, more or less frequent shops to the grocery store and stuff. And so everybody had to rearrange. And I guess maybe I don't think I spent a lot of time dealing with people who were in conflict over how to manage that stuff. I think if it showed up in general, it was she was the one who was doing more, was adding more. So she was adding, I'm now a teacher. I'm now than he was, because he was at work and a little bit different. I mean, I think you guys are a little bit different in the sense that he had somewhere to go, but most of these guys who are at home and still doing their Amazon jobs and their, Facebook jobs or whatever else, they didn't, I don't know. I guess they just didn't feel the need to adapt quite as much.
Well, I think just the having nothing to do was such a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, just that atrophy. But
and again, I think the lack of orientation is a big deal there, because I can do nothing for a week.
Sure.
I can do nothing maybe even for a month, but I can't do nothing indefinitely until who knows when. And so that creates a lot of stress and strain for people, because again, I'm just a big fan of orientation. Orientation helps. If I know that the marathon is 26.2 miles, then when I get to mile 20, I can go, okay, I can dig deep. But this isn't a marathon. This is just running. I mean, that's actually just what a marriage is. Marriage is just running until one of you dies or you divorce, And so
it's a really depressing analogy.
Well, it is the truth, right?
Yeah, it is.
The end of a marriage is death or divorce.
Yeah.
And you don't know when either of those are going to be. So you're trying to push both of those out as far as you can, but you don't have any orientations until maybe you go, okay, every 3 years, we're going to have a big powwow. We're going to say, hey, here's our.
So I really like this whole notion of the 3 years, because I'm looking back, we've been married. This will be our 18-year anniversary and things.
Is that 6 cycles? So.
Yeah. So it's absolutely true. But I want to, if you don't mind talking about this a little bit, because I do find it endlessly fascinating, but will you talk a little bit about the predictors of divorce?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really good information for people that aren't familiar with the Gottman theory to have.
Yeah. So there are 4 main categories, and one of them is called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The other 3 are a little more subtle, but the most famous one is this thing called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And that's where, when there are these 4 particular kinds of behaviors in a relationship that go unchecked or uncorrected, they can lead to relationship demise. And we all have them. We all have all 4. And most of us have one that we like the most. I definitely do. And so they are.
Meaning the one you use in your own marriage?
Yeah, the strategy that I rely on of those 4, I definitely have one that is like hardwired into my whole body. So the 4 are, the first 2 are criticism and defensiveness. And they work very closely with one another. Criticism is basically when I have a complaint and I want to make that complaint known, I make it known in a way that is a threat to your character. So I'll say things like, you always, you never take the garbage out, or you always say that, or you are like your father. And what I'm trying to say is, hey, would you please take the garbage out? But instead I make it about a character assassination. Criticism works very closely with defensiveness, and defensiveness for me, I like to define it as defensive people tend to take either no responsibility or all of it. So they're either they're either like indignant or they're become martyrs. So you'll recognize it, but it's like, I didn't do that. Or, well, I didn't take the garbage out because you didn't unload the dishwasher is a very defensive thing. But the other thing is, fine, I'll take the garbage out. I'll take it out tonight. I'll take it down to the curb. You never have to ask me again. Right. There's this very sort of like, again, it's 0 or 100. So there's no room for you, for the other in that kind of response. And those two things, you can see how they would trigger each other very easily. The third one is called stonewalling. Stonewalling is, I actually have a lot of empathy for stonewallers because they're doing the right thing. And what stonewallers are doing is they're leaving a toxic conversation. They're exiting a situation that is not going to go well. They're just doing it in a way that's impolite and rude. And so you and I might be in a conflict and I might get to the point where I'm like, this isn't going anywhere. So I'll just pick up my phone and start like scrolling through whatever, just to signal to you that I'm done. But it's rude, it's impolite, it's not fair. And so what I need to do in that case is go, hey, this isn't going anywhere. I need about 20 minutes. I'm going to go take a shower. I'll come back and check in with you, which is what we would do to our colleagues, right? Right. When we're in a heated debate with a colleague, you know what? I might need to let me just go get some lunch and think on it a little bit, and then I'll connect with you after. That's the polite way to do stonewalling, which I think is just called break taking. I have a lot of empathy for stonewallers. I also have a lot of empathy for criticizers and for defensive people. Contempt is the last one. And I don't have any empathy for contemptuous people. Contemptuous people, I used to think contempt was I hate you, but contempt is I'm better than you. And so I might be better than you because I'm the man or because I'm the mom. Maybe I make more money. Maybe I have more conservative views than you. And so I'm letting you know that you're less than, or maybe I have more liberal views. And so I'm letting you know. Could be because I'm more athletic, and why aren't you more athletic? Some contempt is actually benevolent. It's like this. It's like I can't believe you said that to me. I would never say that to you. I would never. I'm so good at relationships that I would never say this thing to you. I would never
possibly do that. Ever, never.
You know. And so again, it's sort of this. I'm above you somehow. So all four of those are present in all relationships.
I was gonna say, like, it's very humbling to hear you talk about them, because I've read about them plenty, but I mean, I absolutely can identify myself in all four of those, and I hate it.
We all can. And I always ask couples at the beginning, I'm like, hey, I'm going to describe these four to you. Do you recognize them? And they're like, yeah, they're exactly what you said. And I go, do you have a favorite? And they'll say, yeah, I'm really defensive. Zach, I'm really defensive. And so I'm a master. I understand it inside and out. And I always say the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my marriage is take responsibility for my defensiveness, which I have really enjoyed doing. It's been about 10 years and I'm really good at it. I'm really good at being defensive, but I'm also really good at not being defensive because I've leaned into it a little bit. And I can talk more about that because it's fun and it's easy for me. But when people are able to identify that this is me, I'm a criticizer or I'm a stonewaller or whatever, then I'll offer kind of the remedy or the perspective change that needs to be there. But then I say nothing happens in your relationship until you grab the reins of your horseman and you pull it in until you saddle it up and say, no, I'm in charge of this. Because again, criticizers, they can look at a situation and go, this isn't good. I don't like this situation. This is not a healthy situation. And then they need to learn how to ask for the change that they want in a way that their partner can hear them.
I think that's the hardest part. And definitely,
or the way that their kid can hear them or the way that their colleague can hear them. Doesn't matter.
This is what I was going to say is like, not only have we been stuck at home, right? And I know the way that I need to ask some things, but even as my kids get older, and this is when it gets tricky, is when you start seeing your spouse and your child. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh my God, there are two now. Mm-hmm. And there's one of me. Mm-hmm. And now I got to navigate all of this stuff in one house 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Right. And so me, like I can own, I am absolutely a criticizer veering into contempt at times.
Sure. Yeah.
And so easy. For me, like I can feel myself derailing even with my kid.
Yeah.
So I've spent all day with my kid reining it in and really making an effort with my kids. But then my husband comes home, I got nothing left.
You got to clock out. Yeah.
Like my bucket is like bone dry. I've used up my patience well.
Yeah.
And nothing has refueled it because I've been alone all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that 100%. And again,
And then here you are like just stuck in this cycle.
Totally.
So what do you tell people?
Well, I think to you in particular, I would say, make sure that you're finding the way to get your bucket filled up. I mean, that is a requirement to be in any kind of healthy relationship, is that you're not operating out of a deficit. And, I think it became very apparent to everybody over the last few years that they couldn't get that from their spouse exclusively. Like,
right.
You can't, they can't do it. I mean, and you couldn't do it when your husband comes home from work. You couldn't be like, hey, how do I fill your bucket? Because yours is threatened by the fact that you've been with your kids all day, that there's this virus out there, that there's, no reasonable outlet to talk about it to anybody that disagrees with you. I mean, like, there's all kinds of ways that we were getting sucked dry and nothing was coming back in. So I'm a huge advocate for make sure you are getting what you need to make sure that you are healthy in a way that you can help, take responsibility for your stuff. And then we bring it to the relationship. It's not reasonable to think that you can be in any kind of healthy relationship while your tires are flat and you need oil change and your battery's about to die and you don't have any gas. Like why would I expect to go on a road trip?
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like what I'm hearing you say is for those of us who are, I mean, I wouldn't say ready to leave our marriages, but coming out of this last 2 years being like, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we do this? What I'm kind of hearing from you, and it's interesting, is to say, let's not do anything desperate here, but like, would it be worth it in the interest of getting curious? Would it be worth it to just take a 3-year, like, consider this a cycle?
Yeah.
Reevaluate and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, we all got thrust into this 3-year thing without any context. And now if we're going to come out of it, we need to establish a context that makes sense to the relationship. And that may be, hey, maybe we don't take ourselves as seriously for 3 years. Or, hey, maybe let's agree that for the next 3 years, we're going to be all about, safety, or maybe we're going to be all about adventure. Maybe we're all about generosity, or maybe we're all about, I think adventure is an interesting one because people are starting to go, okay, let's go on this trip that we haven't been able to go on. Let's go do this thing. Let's go remember that we're a family. And 3 years is long enough that it requires a commitment, but short enough that the consequences aren't going to be like inevitable. You can sort of particularly, and listen, nobody's mastered this. I haven't mastered it. I'm just thinking about, like, as we think about what, and we're in an interesting spot because 3 years from now we'll be empty nesters. So we have like a whole different part of it to go, hey, what is this last 3 years of children in our home going to be like? That's an important conversation to have, to do it on purpose. Because again, what COVID required us to do was make it all up. We made it all up. And so some of us did okay and some of us didn't. And I think the people that did okay, I have this one couple in my practice, I cannot figure out why they keep coming in, but they're so happy. And I'm like, why are you guys so happy? And I think there's a couple things. One is that they're both very committed to their own personal health and well-being. They're very good at taking care of what they need to take care of. They do the things that are important to them. She exercises, he goes to concerts. Like, they are very good about that. They're also, number two, very generous about how they leverage their health and well-being. That's not a thing, like, they're not selfish about it. They're more like, hey, I'm better wife when I exercise. I'm a better husband when I go to concerts or get my quiet time or, hang out with my friends or sleep in or whatever it is. They have all kinds of stuff. I'm a better husband when I hire a handyman to do a job that I don't want to do. She's like, I wish you were handy. He's like, I wish I was handy too, but I'm a better husband when I hire somebody to fix the roof, So they're very generous about what they do with it. And the third thing, which is kind of just, it's sort of a whole nother topic, but I think it's one that is important, is that they're what I would call sex positive. Like, sex is not a space that they have tension, or they actually do have a lot of play and adventure. And I think you can have any kind of healthy relationship, or any kind of healthy relationship certainly requires the first two things, that I'm healthy and that I'm generous about my health. A marriage also requires the third thing, because it's the only place that you can kind of have sex, right? You can't do that in your office or at whatever. But I think this is where I think when people can kind of go, okay, for the next 3 years, I'm going to be really serious about my own health. I'm going to be generous about that. I'm going to get really serious about my use of my horseman. And I'm going to like not take myself so seriously or not take it like that. And why not start there? Because that's the beginning of anything that feels like peace. And then for those of us, and there are a lot in my office, of course, for whom sex is a challenge, particularly in a house that you never leave, that kids are in all the time. Maybe we figure out how to rethink that in a way that the consequences or the consequences aren't so high. Meaning we play a little bit more. We don't take ourselves so seriously, or we do things that aren't sex. Like, I know this is a little bit of a side trail, but like we take showers together that are not erotic, but they're sensual and also effective, or we sleep naked one night a week, or we do kind of, I do put my hand down your pants while we're watching a movie, maybe the back or the side or whatever, but we don't have to knock it out of the park. But we can do things.
We can bunt. Sometimes you got to bunt.
Yeah. Sometimes we can bunt and just be like, that's what we're doing right now. And that's actually not a thing to be embarrassed about or ashamed of or sad about. It can actually just be like, this is what we got. And because this is what we got, this is what we're going to do. And that's cool. That's cool for us. I think when that happens for people, when they commit to being healthy, when they commit to being generous, and when they commit to being intimate in a way that is not work, it's more like play. I think that's where that's kind of my target right now for couples.
I heard something really interesting from actually, I interviewed a woman who her podcast is going to drop tomorrow, but she started her own adoption agency. And as a part of her online pairing service, which is kind of like Match.com for expectant moms and families, it's super cool. But they have developed 12 different family archetypes, if you will.
Sure.
You are the adventurers. You are the, kind of lovers. You're the homebodies. You're the, but it pieces you into 12 different parenting categories. And I went through the process before the interview, and it was super.
Because you're about to adopt a baby.
Because I wanted to see what it was like, Zach.
Like, no, I am.
That is not a COVID pivot I'm taking. But it was pretty interesting because I thought, I've never sat down with my husband to like really think through what our values are as a family and as a couple, and kind of what archetype we would fall into. It was such a helpful exercise. I guess my question is that a healthy thing to do?
Absolutely. And I think again, the thing about the 3-year thing is, you marry somebody when you're young and dumb and you have no idea what you're doing. And you think, these are our values. My value is until death.
Until death do us.
I'm 25 years old and I'm going to say, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. And what the problem is you don't, maybe your brain's not even fully formed yet, but you also don't know what you're doing. So if about every 3 years you said, hey, what we're doing is adventure or growing your family. Like, I think there is a big difference between families that are still maybe going to have another baby, and then people who are like, nope, we're done. Because when we're done, we get rid of assets. We get rid of cribs. We get rid of.
It's so much closure. I have a Barbie camper van that I'm looking at right now, and I'm like, done.
Bye. And so your whole life changes. And I think, again, the more we do that on purpose, the better.
I guess you just said something where I got married when I was 26.
I was 24.
And
no idea what I was saying or doing.
No, because you can't imagine what life has in store for you. You meet with a priest. We're Catholic, so you meet with this. You do your pre-counseling with this.
And of course, he knows everything there is to know about a marriage.
Correct. Yeah, he knows a lot about
so
it.
much practice
and really experienced in that. But you just have so much trust. But what I wish couples knew is the ebb and flow of a life cycle. And that 3-year concept is so brilliant because you kind of go through that first part where you're super excited. Everything's great. And then you're like, hang on, this just got a little bit harder. Now maybe you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Which, women going through pregnancy, men can't understand it. And it is like a real separator.
Yeah.
Because we have to go through this huge physical, emotional, all of the transformation.
Yeah.
So I wish young couples could
Well, here's a fun
understand
fact.
that better.
Here's a fun fact to your question about divorce. There's this sort of myth that divorce, like 50% of marriages end in divorce. We actually, in the business, we think that's too high. Like it's probably closer to 40. And part of why that's really hard to nail down is because nobody can really wrap their heads around whether we're talking about first marriages, second marriages, does death count? Like there's a lot of weird science in the way but what has become clear is that most marriages that end in divorce end inside of 7 years. It's usually year 4 and there's usually a toddler. And so the most challenging time is at the end of that first cycle, heading into the second one, when you're kind of like, wait a second, this is not what I signed up for. And I don't know if this is like what I want. And, having a baby is really hard. It's really straining on the relationship. And so people who had babies during COVID, that's crazy. That blows my mind. And so they're not coming into my practice yet because they're still reeling from, I don't know.
I can't even imagine it.
I don't even know how to do this.
Well, and having no parenting groups, no support, nothing.
No, nothing.
So what do you think? I mean, I hear that about the first 7 years, but I also think, year 21 is the third cycle.
Yeah.
And that's a toughie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard, man. Again, I feel really grateful for my own experience as a therapist because after 10 years and, I've got my 10,000 hours, nothing to me feels like, this is the thing. This is the way it is. This is like, 21 is the thing. Because I get to be in so many individual stories, but for sure, anytime you get to a place and you look around and you go, how did I get here? Period. You have to kind of have a crisis of faith, a crisis of consciousness, because if you don't know how you got there, you definitely don't know how you're getting out. And that's where like you have to start to kind of renegotiate the terms of the situation.
That's super interesting. I like that term, renegotiate the terms.
Yeah, you do. You have to renegotiate the terms. Just go, hey, I'm willing to do this for about 3 more years where you are, crazy busy and I'm carrying all the groceries or whatever. Like I'm willing to do that, or I'm willing to live in this house for 3 more years, or I'm willing to, I don't know. There's tons of things, but I think anytime that you can sort of say, hey, we need to reestablish kind of the baseline, which again, right now, it's a unique time in history that people get to do that, then that is important. And if you can get somebody to help you, whether it is a group, it might just be another group of neighbors, or it might be might be therapy, it might be your church or whatever. But I think reestablishing the baseline is going to be really critical for people, because otherwise they're just going to continue to kind of make it up, because now we have that muscle. We've exercised that muscle, just making it up, That's the one we know how to use versus the one that feels more deliberate and more, more intentional.
That's a really interesting way to put that, because you're right. I think it has a lot of people wondering, like, I made it through this. I can literally make it through anything.
Well, yeah. And all bets are off, right? Like, no, that used to be true, but it's not true anymore, because there could be another pandemic. So I'm not going to live my life like this. I'm going to live my life like that. Because if another pandemic comes, I'm definitely not going to, it's done it's been really hard for everybody, of course. And, I don't think we fully understand the implications of what it's going to be like as things continue to open up and we continue to have more freedom. Because here's the other thing that's interesting too. I had a client who was 70 and he goes, Zach, you lost 2 years of your life, which is not exactly the right way to put it, but you know what I mean? But that was only like 3% of what you have left, or 10%. And he goes, I lost like 30% of what I have left.
That's what my mom said. My mom's,
and I'm like, whoa.
I won't divulge my mom's age.
But your kid, sure, let's talk about your mom, but like your kids, when they're our age, they're going to be like, oh yeah. Way back in like elementary school, there was this weird period where everybody was wearing masks. Like it's going to be kind of a non-event for some of these people.
Thank God. That's why I think my kids, we got lucky because my kids were in the sweet spot for wanting to be at home with us, right? Like they wanted to be there.
Yeah.
It was fine. They were safe. They had great snacks.
Yeah.
They got to watch more shows and they got to play outside. So for them, I feel really lucky. But for people that had older kids, for grandparents, my mom would say, I don't care if I die of COVID, I have 10 good years left. I have lost 2 of them. No more.
Yeah.
And that I understand, to be honest. I have a lot of compassion for that because like, yeah, all right, well, it could be, I mean, I have more now after 2 years and vaccines and all this, I have way more trepidation around getting my mammogram every year than I do around COVID. For me, there's way more risk that I'm going to die of breast cancer than of COVID at this current moment in time. Right. So for me, it's sort of like, okay, well now we can get back to being scared of the real things like car crashes.
Totally.
And
again, just even to that point, as much as we've been talking about sort of the 3 years, I do think that the most important thing is just today. It's like, because we've all kind of come to terms with the fact that maybe we don't have tomorrow or whatever version of that. But yeah, I mean, if you're not going to be able to tackle the next 3 years, can you tackle today? And the way you do that is you take charge of your defensiveness. You take charge of your criticism. You take charge of your, need to take a break, but in a polite way. Like when you're feeling contemptuous to your partner, you go out of your way to look for the things that you admire and respect and enjoy and are attracted to. Like that's the work that you can do right now, independent of your 3-year plan that you need to generate or come up with.
Well, I think that's the perfect note to end on, Zach. I know you're on a tight timeline today.
I am. I'm famous. I'm fancy.
I don't want to, I know your driver's waiting, so I don't want to keep them.
Yeah.
Sergey is out there waiting for you.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. Tell everybody where they can find you, and I'll put your podcast and your books in my show notes.
Yeah. So to find me, I'm at zachbrittle.com. That's the easiest place to find about my practice. And then I have a gig with my friend Laura Heck. It's called Marriage Therapy Radio. That comes out every week. And we're at marriagetherapyradio.com or wherever the rest of your podcasts are sold.
Cannot thank you enough for your time.
Yeah,
I really,
my pleasure.
I hope this podcast resonates and people can find more resources because I think all of us probably could use a tune-up.
Yeah. No doubt. I definitely can. So, and I'm an expert.
Me too. And I'm not an expert and I'm desperately trying every day. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank Zach for his honesty and insight. It's hard to disagree with science-backed relationship advice. And while I certainly don't enjoy grabbing the reins of my 4 horsemen, I know it will make me a better partner. Please listen to Zach's podcast, Marriage Therapy Radio, anywhere you find podcasts. And please share this episode with anyone you think might benefit from this conversation. Let's be honest, marriage is hard. The last 2 years have been difficult, and they've revealed both pleasant and unpleasant things about all of us. Here's where we reset. Good luck. You can find me on Instagram at Right in Front of My Face. Please rate and review this podcast, preferably with 5 stars, anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Twitter as well. Remember, ask some deeper questions, maybe to your partner this week, because you never know what's happening right in front of your face.